Hi, I'm Marcus with the IndieMusicLab.com. So a few of you may remember a while back when I recreated Novo Amor's song Anchor, which sounded like this.
And I hear your ship is coming in. Your tears a sea for me to swim.
And I'll go ahead and I'll leave links below in the description if you want to dive into the finer details of the production and the work that went into recreating this song. But today what I thought I would focus on are some principles that we producers can learn from these artists. And in this case, today we're specifically talking about Novo Amor. And so what I'm going to share with you today are 3 of the top insights that I've observed even just through recreating this exact song Anchor, and I'm going to share those insights with you today, and I think it's really going to help you just become a better producer through the lens of understanding how other great producers operate. So let's dive in. Insight number 1 that I learned from Novo Amor is this: make every track virtually indispensable. This is such a critical thing. This is one of those things that beginner producers and intermediate producers, we just get wrong, all of us. But that's a normal part of the process, so don't beat yourself up about it. But this is a real problem that we tend to, just because we can, will add a track that doesn't actually make the song better. It's just that we've fallen in love with a particular type of synth or a piece of software, and every song we make, we're like, I like that software and I'm going to use it no matter what. And the problem with that is that your priorities are in the wrong place. When the priority should be, what makes this song sound as good as possible, rather than what do I want to do with it? Now, this is a touchy subject because as the artist, obviously we want to have that freedom and feeling of like, I don't care, I'm going to use that sound because I think it sounds cool. But even in that, you're still using it because it sounds cool, not just because you think you should add something. And that's the distinction here. Don't add elements to your songs because you think you should. Add elements to your songs that make the track better. And I'm going to show you what that might look like, because what I mean by make every track virtually indispensable is listen to what happens if I just go, okay, first of all, look at this session, right? Look at how minimal it is. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. What is it? 9 tracks, 9 or 10. That is all that is going on in this session. And I'm going to hit play. I don't want you to listen to what happens when I mute and unmute random tracks. So here we go.
Took the breath from my open mouth. Never known how it broke me down. I went and circled somewhere else. Shook the best when your love was home. Store it up on your summer glow you in.
And then over here.
And I hear your ship is coming in. Your tears a sea.
Do you notice how much value each and every one of these tracks in this session has? Now, of course, within every session, there's still a hierarchy. There are still certain tracks that have more impact and more influence than other tracks. And in this case, these doubles that come in the chorus are probably the elements that if I had to cut something, I would probably just cut these doubles in the chorus. But did you notice the drastic change that happened with every other track when I muted just one thing at a time? Like just one of these 2 lead vocals, or just the acoustic, or just the bass, or just that pad sound. Everything completely changed. And that just goes to show how important it is that every track in your song is virtually indispensable. Like if you mute it, it's like your song feels unfinished again. This is a skill that is not easy to learn. This takes so much time and so much repetition to really get a good feel for it. But the more that you create songs, the more that you work on your craft, you will start to really build and develop your intuition in this area. And you'll be able to really make these decisions well that serve the song. Because if you can make every track serve the song this well, like Novo Amor does in his song Anchor, it is just incredible because every track just has so much life and adds so much power and value to that song. So that is insight number one that I want you to really chew on is make every track in your session virtually indispensable. And then one more thing I'll add here at the end as well is if you mute a track and it makes basically no difference between muting and unmuting, like, this, right? So if you mute a track and unmute a track and either it sounds the same, there's no difference, or it maybe even sounds better without that track, you have to be ruthless about cutting away tracks that don't need to be there. You gotta cut away the fat. Now, this can be a problem because often those of us in the home studio, in our bedroom, we are not only the recording artist, we are also the producer, we are also the mixing engineer, we are also the songwriter and the vocalist. And sometimes we fall in love with our own creations and we feel like we need to hang on to them even when they're not serving the song well. So this is just a key point. Make sure that you are ruthless about getting rid and deleting tracks that don't actually add value to your song, and make sure that every track in your session really is almost indispensable. It's that important to the overall structure of the song. Now, insight number 2 that producers can learn from Novo Amor is create depth through vocal stacking. Now, this is very common, especially in this genre of ambient, indie folk. You've heard this a ton from artists like Bon Iver, from really any indie folk artist out there. It works really well to layer vocals and create vocal doubled effects. And in this case, we have that as well. So we've got 2 lead vocals, as you can see here. And that sounds like this.
And I hear your ship is coming in.
And again, I delve deeper into the finer details of mixing and producing these things, so I'll leave a link in the description below for that. But this technique here is what I call the share the spotlight technique. And what that means is there is not one lead vocal, there are 2 lead vocals, and they both share the spotlight. They have equal weight, equal value. And because if you take one away, oh, let's come back here actually. Right, that's just one lead vocal, and it's fine, but it just creates an interesting atmosphere when you use the share the spotlight vocal double technique. Not in every song, but on specific songs, especially in this genre of, again, indie folk, ambient types of songs. It can work so well. So be sure to try this out at home. This is such a beautiful way to add depth quickly and add fullness and warmth to your tracks with putting in minimum work. You don't have to, add 10 different elements. And instead, if you simply add a vocal double and you create this share the spotlight technique, that in of itself creates so much fullness that the instrumentation then can just be very minimal because you've already created a vibe just by doubling up that lead vocal. So that is the share the spotlight technique. Now, if you want to learn more about vocal double techniques, I have an exclusive video called My 5 Ways to Produce Vocal Doubles. So I'll leave a link in the description below for that if you really want to dive deeper into learning the different approaches to vocal doubles. Now, a couple more points when it comes to vocal doubles in this specific remake is notice how when the chorus hits, we've got some additional doubles that come in, right? So let me actually start here and go one by one. So we've got this lead vocal, then left and right, share the spotlight, and then come over here. We've added 2 extra layers of doubles just to create a distinction and a contrast between the verse and the chorus. Now, as I mentioned before earlier in this video, these doubles are probably the tracks in this particular song that have the least amount of impact. Like, the song would be fine without them, but they really help to kind of add that lift when the chorus hits. And one thing that I didn't mention that I'll mention here, as you can see here, whenever you are doing the share the spotlight technique and generally just vocals in general, it's a good idea to at least experiment with panning. So the lead vocals, the left and right, are panned 70 left, 70 right, and then these doubled ones here that we just added in for the chorus are panned 100 left, 100 right. So those are far left and far right.
Tears, a sea for me to swim.
And then finally, the last vocal double is an octave down. And that sounds like this.
And I hear a storm is coming in.
Right? It's just kind of adding in a nice bit of texture underneath everything. And I generally view that as a vocal double as well, even though it's an octave down. Now, in case you're confused, let me just very quickly mention this. None of these takes here, none of these tracks are duplicate tracks. These are all their own separate takes. So there's no like duplicating the exact audio and then processing one differently than the other. There are times where you can do that, but when you're talking about, these more authentic genres like ambient, folk, indie rock, you have to be very careful with overusing effects, especially when you're talking about doubled effects. By all means, when you're first starting out, don't even bother, when it comes to vocal doubles anyway, don't even bother with using plugins like a chorus or a doubler to get this effect. Just record multiple takes and then use panning left and right to create a nice, wide, and full sound. So that's insight number 2. It's create depth through vocal stacking. Now, insight number 3 that producers can learn from Novo Amor is look for authenticity, not perfection. This is, again, especially in these genres of indie rock, indie folk, ambient. You have to lean into that authenticity. You cannot, quantize everything and put everything on a grid and then wonder why does my song just sound lifeless and just doesn't make me want to move and doesn't sound compelling? It's like it's too robotic. It's too tight. It's too on the grid. You need to allow for that human effect, that human influence, and that authenticity to come through rather than simply relying on perfection to get the sound that you want. And this song is this is a great example of that with this particular song, because one example of it is this song or this guitar is in drop D tuning, this acoustic guitar, and notice on certain notes, you get a buzzy sound on that low string. See, you hear that little buzz? I think over here we've got it too. There it is, right? That's so nice because listen to that in context. Yeah, right? That buzziness, that authenticity, that imperfection. That's not perfect in technical terms, but it sounds better than if it wasn't there. Another example in this track is notice how, and I heard this on the original track as well, which is why I added it in this remake, but in the overall sound of this song, you can hear like an underlying noise that is just there the whole time. It's like, it's got that almost hissing quality to it. And so what I did to kind of get that is on my vocals bus here, I added RC20 to it. And now RC20 is also adding a bit of distortion, but it's not adding anything crazy. But the noise here is what's really adding it. So listen to. I'm going to turn it up so you can really hear the effects. Right? So that's the noise we're adding. We're turning it way down, but it's still, you hear it? It's still adding a ton to it. So if we come over here, there's without it. What's interesting about that is it sounds cleaner. It actually sounds more precise. It sounds more elegant. But when we turn on RC20, and especially by adding this little noise here, it creates more of that authenticity sort of feeling, or that authentic sort of feeling. And it makes it feel like you're actually in a studio, or you're actually listening to this in an arena or in a club. Like there's more ambiance to it. It feels imperfect. It has that pull that just really brings you into the song, and that this helps. This imperfection helps. So that's another example. And then there are other things as well, things like imperfect vocal tuning, imperfect vocal timing, where you don't make it, completely perfect, but you allow for those slight deviations to pop through. Now, of course, there comes a point where things can become too distracting if it's a mistake, but you want to really just watch out for those components of your song where it's imperfect, but it's also not distracting, because that's where the gold is. That is that straight and narrow path that you want to look for. And then also you could think of this in terms of like guitar doubles. When you're recording multiple takes of rhythm guitars, let's say, sometimes it's preferable for the left guitar to be slightly off timing wise and even energy wise with the right guitar. That can add some life to the overall production as well. And then a critical one too is not quantizing the drums. So if you're using VST drums like Addictive Drums or Easy Drummer, and if you have the habit of, as soon as you record it in or you dial in or draw in those MIDI notes, you go and you hit the little quantize button that just locks it on the grid and snaps it to the BPM of your song, that is going to really take the life out of it because it's going to sound too stiff and too lifeless. So that's another example of making sure that you maintain that sense of realness like you get with a real drummer. A real drummer it's literally impossible for a real drummer to be perfectly on the grid. So why would you want to do that if you're trying to emulate that using VST drums? You want to try to imitate what is actually happening with a real drum kit. And it's not just because we want to sound like it's real drums, it's also because we want to lean into what our bodies just naturally respond to. And we respond to groove, we respond to authenticity. And we definitely respond to those qualities more than we respond to perfection. So keep that in mind. Perfection is not the goal, authenticity is. So thanks so much for watching this video. Again, if you want to learn more about vocal doubles, as I talked about with the number 2 insight in this video, then go check out my 5 ways to produce vocal doubles. This walks you through my top 5 approaches, and it's an in-depth training for how to approach recording and producing and mixing vocal doubles so that you have this really nice arsenal of different approaches that you can use and experiment with your own vocal production. So I'll leave a link in the description below for that. And also next week, we're going to look at Phoebe Bridgers using this exact same formula that we used today. So beyond that, be sure to also leave a comment and let me know which artist or band you would like me to cover in the future with this type of video. So thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.